Hi, I'm Rachel, and I did my country report on the Republic of the Philippines. The Philippines is a country comprised of over 7,000 islands, and within these islands, they are abundant in natural resources such as timber, petroleum, nickel, cobalt, silver, gold, salt, and copper. There are metals that are priced expensively and mined out of the ground and exported out to build a stronger economy, but the resources like lumber are also sold within the country for a profit. Approximately 41% of the Philippines' land is used for agricultural purposes, both to feed the population in the region, but also to export for the United States and other trading partners. Among these other international trading partners are China and Japan, because they're relatively close in proximity to the islands themselves. Another approximate 25% of the land is forest, which houses the animals that are indigenous to the territory. Sadly, though, there are controversies pertaining to the management of the Philippines' resources because, like most natural resources, the land produces they're being used more quickly than they can be replenished due to deforestation that's abundant in that country, unfortunately. Early discovery of this country dates back to 1521, when sailor Ferdinand Magellan claimed the land he had discovered as being part of the property of Spain. He also renamed the land to Filipinas after the King of Spain at the time. 5 Spanish ships had made their way to the islands, and from that point on, the Spanish rule was imposed on the inhabitants, causing the national language to shift to Spanish. In the 1800s, writers like José Rizal wrote of the horrors that the Filipino people had to endure under the Spanish rule in books like Noli Me Tangere, which he cited how the Spain abused their power. Although his literature was outlawed in the country, multitudes of followers agreed with the words Rizal put on paper and thus started revolts in the streets. Unfortunately, Jose Rizal was executed on December 30th, 1896 by firing squad for his work against the ruling empire. But the time was perfect to revolutionize because Spanish-controlled countries like Cuba also wanted to be free of their captors, so the uprisings proceeded in those countries too. On April 25th, 1898, the 7-Year War began that led to the liberation of Puerto Rico, Guam, Cuba, and the Philippines, as that was the time the United States proclaimed war against the Spanish, and once the U.S. had won, $20 million were paid to the Spanish for those new territories. The Philippines has a highly developed economy, ranking 36th internationally, according to the International Monetary Fund statistics. This country uses the Philippine peso as natural currency and has been used as early as the 16th century. An important sector of the Philippines economy is tourism, because approximately 7.8% of the country's GDP in 2014 was dependent on it. Minimum wages in 2018 increased from 512 PHP per day in 2017 to 537 PHP, which is now the equivalent of $10.54 in American currency. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, only 37% of employed workers in the country are women, while the rest are men. The Philippine region follows a representative democracy. They hold elections every 6 years to establish who holds the presidential office and have leaders for each one of the provinces that make up the nation. Similarities between the Philippines and the United States include they have 2 branches of government to write bills, enforce laws, and make important decisions. The Senate, or Senado, contains 24 members. Half of these members are elected through a popular vote every 3 years to serve a 6-year term. And then the second one, the House of Representatives, also known as Kapulangan ng mga kinatawan, consists through sectoral representation. 250 members that are voted in every 3 years, but 20 of these members are chosen through sectoral representation in each of the provinces. According to Freedom House, there were major setbacks for the Philippines in relation to the Freedom Index. In 2007, they were disqualified from the list of electoral democracies due to a major decline in freedoms and representation among the people and who was being voted into power and how much power the people had to vote them in. The Philippines Bill of Rights is found in Article 3 of the country's 1987 Constitution, so it was written pretty late. Among these, the most notable are the right to form unions, providing of rehabilitation and compensation for victims of torture by the law, and the prohibition of involuntary servitude except as fitting punishment for the crime. These rights are set in stone, however, there is proof of violation in some of these rights. For example, Ferdinand Castillo and another fellow political prisoner, Romel Tuque, were never read their rights. Castillo was blindfolded for 4 hours while interrogation occurred. Interrogators questioned him, threatening his life and his family's lives. Violations have also been seen recently in the Philippines citizens' right to press and speech. Their current president, Rodrigo Duterte, has been cracking down on news journals who can be perceived as critical about President Duterte's leadership and the current drug war within the country, how he's dealing with that. In 2018, the president revoked the registration of The Rappler, which is an online news journal who has a history of negative political critique. This affects not just the news outlets as a company, but the individuals in charge of them as well. Censorship in this region can be seen as either shutting down the publications or throwing wild allegations toward the journalists, such as tax evasion or failure to obtain a license in order to destroy their image and reputation, all because they wanted to use their voice. There's also dire need for the addressing of violated human rights as well. The Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency is now enforcing mandatory surprise drug tests for school teachers and students as young as 4th grade. This is a huge violation because it forces kids to relinquish bodily autonomy and may deter the children from even wanting to attend school, which could lower attendance rates in the long term and really affect the education system. In terms of women's rights, young women and men have been reported to join extremist groups in order to gain sort of a family relationship with their fellow members. Luckily enough for the communities of the Republic, there are organizations whose prime directive is to find ways to get Christian and Muslim people to coexist. Peace Direct is an organization that takes Muslim volunteer workers and places them into communities that are mainly populated by Christian people. In hopes that things go as planned, the organization hopes to normalize camaraderie among these two belief systems for the good of the Republic. Studies done within the last 2 years have come to the conclusion that 7.7% of the population is living in modern slavery in the Philippines. When put into text, the Global Slavery Index indicates that an estimated 784,000 individuals are currently in the slavery circulation. Additionally, the grading scale for the country's response for this many people being put into slavery is a BB, meaning that the current number of people living there is in this terrible state is not expected to drastically change in the future. Domestic servants and bonded labor are still common in some parts of the Philippines as a method of getting work done without having to sacrifice any money, but sex-related slavery is by far the most commercial. Women and children are specifically a demographic that kidnappers and slave obtainers will prioritize because they are more profitable to sell slaves as body parts. According to the Freedom United organization, about 71% of modern slaves are women and children, meaning that there are at least 28.6 million women and children being held against their will to do things for the profit of other persons or peoples. Although the percentages are for a global reading, the ratio of male to female victims are about the same. 11 women die every day from complications during pregnancy, during birth. Lack of money leads to the lack of resources to treat patients, as in the case of 4,500 Filipino women every year who die because they did not get the proper care they desperately needed. Bleeding is normal during deliverance of a child, but when the organs of a mother are ruptured, the severe hemorrhaging can very easily cause death. And education is one of the best ways to change how a society functions to be able to repair the damage that is still present. Situations like the spread of disease or death due to lack of information can be remedied by investing more time and money into the school systems. Another thing is elementary school enrollment is not mandatory, but it is helpful in terms of providing childcare for parents who need to work and stay afloat. Enrollment rates have steadily been increasing since 1991. But moving towards the high school portion of education, about 55% of students who were enrolled in high school graduated, and only 12% of those who graduated from high school went on to further education at a college level. The Republic of the Philippines is a country that has been prone to unfortunate situations from its inception, originating from violent takeovers turned the natives bitter, and the revolutions that followed did not make the atmosphere any more welcoming. Fighting to finally obtain some sort of control for a nation in ruins was a goal that the Philippine people set out to accomplish, and only recently did they get their freedom. A land that has truly endured blow after blow of pain and suffering that continues today. Now only the willpower of the people will determine where the country goes from now, because with effort, the issues of political, physical, and financial struggles could be taken care of.